Kingdom Death Monster Part 2. We're going to be pushing up some podcasts to my channel here, talking about this amazing game. Or I should say questioning this amazing game, because I find Kingdom Death Monster is a reflection on the individual or the individuals playing. And I should say right away, pause this for a second. Absolutely no spoilers. I'm not going to give anything away, because 99% of this game, and not just because it's a premium price, but as a player, you deserve to experience the gaming vehicle as it was intended. You deserve to stare down those encounters, go on those hunts, and discover what you're going to discover. You deserve to make those hard choices on there and figure out what you're going to do and how you're going to do it. So vital, very, very important. Not going to give anything away. But we are going to talk about some questions, because there are multiple paths that I find as I go through the game. Obviously, certain paths open up based on the cards. But you can see through the storyline playing in the background, especially if you've been through a couple of settlements, whether they're successful or not, replay value is massive on there. You start to see the potential, or at least from my perspective, I see these places in the game where there's another story arc, but it's just beyond reach. Or I feel like I'm playing Wing Commander. I played way too much Wing Commander 1 on there. And it was interesting because the game, while it was linear and you went down these paths based on victory or defeat and how many kills you got, some of them were dead ends, but they didn't appear as dead ends. So you're like, oh, I completed the game. I won the game. But it was a dead end aspect of it. And others, it really took you down one really, really far path. And you could tell there were other paths playing alongside. That's a perfect analogy if you played Wing Commander 1 on there, or I should say go on YouTube and kind of watch it a little bit, some of those paths. I feel like that's happening in Kingdom Death Monster, where there's other things going on. There could easily be another settlement just like mine, just like ours over there. So there's these choices that you make. That's why I ask the questions. That's why with these podcasts, it's really the questions. So the first one was about using the Founding Stones. The second one is gear versus characters. And it seems like, so what I mean by that is you're going to go on the hunt. You're going to get some resources. There's really three types of resources in Kingdom Death Monster. There's the animal parts, the monster parts, gathering certain materials and plants and other things discovered during the hunt. There might be some rolls as you're stalking the prey where you get some resources in there. So that's kind of your pool that you're going to develop out based on what directions you've decided to take the settlement in. That is the most random. Well, actually, everything random is about the game. That's a very random part about the game, because it's going to depend literally on the luck of the dice. Now, we're going to pull in another favorite board game of mine, trigger some people. I love Talisman, the fantasy adventure game. I've got all the expansions. We play it with the gaming group a couple of times a year. I love the big games. Actually, in 2 weeks, we've got a 10-player game on there. And a lot of complaints, people say with this game, Talisman, that was born, its genesis in the 80s. We've come a long way in board gaming. Yes, absolutely. And people say that Talisman, there's no tactics because it's just roll and move. Roll a d6. I got a 4. Do I go to the left? Do I go to the right? Okay, I go to the left. I draw a card. I do what the card says. But it's all about the dice. You roll the dice. You see what happens. But there are ways to control the random. I can't eliminate it in Talisman. I can't eliminate it, but I can control it based on certain game mechanics. And against my opponent, I want to unleash the random on them. So that little bit of kind of experience I brought into Kingdom Death Monster, where it's like randomness happens everywhere and you're rolling lots of dice on there. I want to try and control the random. So this is the most random part in the aspect of the game with your resources. You have no control over it. You can do certain things, and there are certain ways as your settlement boosts out that you can potentially increase the draw of it. But a lot depends on what you get, when you get it, and do you have the resources. And there's all sorts of crafting stuff. There's crafting guides. There's crafting strategies. If you guys want, I'll offer some of my strategies on there, but I really don't want to cross that invisible line and give away any spoilers with it. I want you to discover it for yourself. But realize, that's the one part of the game. The second part of the game, in terms of, this is the success of you actually fulfilling the hunt, but also making sure you have the ability to withstand certain challenges as you move through the lantern years. The second part is literally the population. I find I want to keep the population up on there. There's certain things that you can do to increase your population, but it has them starting out a little bit weaker. There's also choices where you can be a lot more draconian and a lot more strict, very Spartan-like, martial-like. And while that cuts down on the population, it tends to make your survivors a lot stronger. That's a question. That's a decision. You want to try both out. But again, the randomness is you die everywhere in this game. I mean, the last settlement, I keep track of all my settlements on there, and I write like a little bio, a little narrative, not only because I've physically put in the time, amazing gaming time into playing the game, but I want to try and see a pattern. And I start out with 4 survivors, and I just kind of up them in numbers. So my last survivor, when I completed the base core, I think it was up to Ramses 9 on there for one of my survivors. On a side note, we have played with 5 and 6 survivors. I have, because one of my main goals in I was going to say board gaming, but Kingdom Death Monster, KDM, is like part board game, part novel, part role-playing game, part kind of boutique miniatures type setup. But my number one rule, and this stems from Dungeons & Dragons also, everyone sits down, everyone plays on there. If that makes the game a little bit broken, if that makes the game a little bit easier, that's okay. Kingdom Death Monster can use that to be a little bit easier. And I should say that my collection of KDM was what? Like, it's not 1.5. It was the original first release 1.0 on that. So I believe that the newer version, as it rolls out, is going to support additional players. But I played with more than just the 4 on there. It changes things. It makes some aspects of the game easier. It makes some aspects of the game more punishing. But I say that because the number one thing that's going to happen, you're going to chew through your population. And going back to the gear, my personal take and my answer to that question was, I want to get as big a population as possible on there. I want to build in some cushion so that I can potentially draw new recruits into that. The challenge with that becomes, so that's I'm getting ahead of myself a little bit. That's the second consideration, the second path. The third consideration that, in theory, you have the least control over. But if you explore and you're willing to take risks, and if you have some of the additional monsters to hunt, there's options in there. I'm going to let you figure them out. The way to develop abilities and fighting skills is massive in the game, is massive. The challenge with this path is they're somewhat random, but they're more specific, and you have to survive to the point where you can unlock them, where you can earn them, where you can develop them. And they're tied to an individual survivor, which means if you get mauled and maimed, it's one thing if you get killed, but you might not get killed. You might be just so mauled and messed up where you have to almost retire it. So now you lose that. So what we see, and some games I've seen online, and my initial strategy, of course, was to focus on gear, because I can't control it, but I can influence it. And it made sense to focus on population because I build that cushion in. The challenge I found with the population, aggressively going in and really trying to push that, maybe at the expense of the other two. The challenge here was, if I was lucky enough to make it to the mid-lantern years, I found if my primary team got wiped, meaning I lost 2, and then I pulled out of the hunt, now I'm really behind. So now I got to go hunt some easier stuff, even if I have the gear, recovered the gear. I got to hunt some easiest stuff. That's burning lantern years, where you always want to stay just whatever the power level is that you can handle, you want to be 1 higher because I want that influx, because again, the resources are random. So whatever my level is to hunt, I want to hunt a little bit higher. Of course, what is that? You got to learn that. You got to figure that out. And for someone like me that's a big gambler and likes to take risks, this is a deadly game. This is not a good game for me on there, because I'm like taking mad risks all the time, even when I know better on there. Although solo is one thing. I take a lot of risks. If I'm playing with a gaming group, I'm not going to let my player personality infect them. So I tend to play a lot more conservative. So for a long time I was gear and I was population. Then I started to switch and say, okay, in terms of the storylines and the arcs and figuring things out, maybe I want to dial it back a little bit on the population. I mean, look, you always need to try and keep that boosted. You do. Because at some point you're going to get whacked. At some point you're going to get hit. But what I noticed was, let me push things into abilities and the fighting skills and that. And switch my gear to defensive gear on that. Put that, I don't want to say is the number one priority, because you really can't have a single number one priority. You need to be developing multiple. It's like having multiple revenue streams in this game. You need to have multiple ways to develop and push things out. But I found if I can focus on the survivability and at least take one or two hits, armor, before things start going to limbs and I start getting my arms torn off and my brain exploding like that, that built in enough of a cushion that when I focused on trying to pursue developing fighting skills, I could do it. And then if I went into a hunt where, okay, it's just not going that good, maybe because it's the first time I'm hunting that monster, or just for whatever reason it's not, if I have that little bit of cushion of armor, then I can try to run away. I can try to get out of there. Obviously, the first couple of Lanterneer playthroughs, I'm focusing all on the weapons, because I'm like, I got to do the most damage. And I've tried those builds, and you can really craft a lot of great things. For now, me, primarily, I like to play skills and armor. Now, obviously, if you draw some really good stuff to craft, and you're going to need some legendary gear, some really signature weapons on there. But the other place that I found that builds in, again, no spoilers. I know I'm kind of talking a little bit nebulous here, but I don't want to give it away. There's things that can potentially happen in the game, especially with some of the additional monsters to hunt on there. You can lose your gear. It can get perma-destroyed. And that's big sad face, and that's going to set you back a lot, where the only way I'm going to lose my fighting abilities is if I get killed outright on there. And I can build that in with the armor. So those are the three true resources of the game: your population, your gear, and the individual character development. I did have, I'm not going to name the exact kit because I don't want to give it away. I essentially played a monk. Knowing the game and knowing some of these decision trees ahead of time from a couple of playthroughs. This was after about 8 or 9 playthroughs. I was also playing in a D&D campaign. I'm playing my monk, Tozen, and I'm like, I want to like backfist these monsters and like kick these monsters and do all this stuff. I'm going to go unarmed. And see what I can do on there. So especially if you're going to try and actively pursue a certain skill set versus, just seeing what comes along based on the random, I found I definitely needed survivability. I definitely needed armor. I definitely needed perhaps a way to lure away the prey and the hunt and the monster on there. So a lot of different interlocking strategies. But whatever strategy you pursue, the questions to ask: what's my plan for the gear? What's my plan for the population of my settlement? And what's my plan for the actual individual characters? Am I going to look to put resources into them, into the survivors, or are they all just going to be wasteoids, and if they get killed, it doesn't matter because I'm putting everything into keeping my population numbers up and my gear up? Again, a lot of decisions to be made, and even the more conservative ones, you can get hit with the random stick, and it really messes things up. You just have to roll with it.